Good afternoon. I'm Chris McEntee. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of AGU. It's great to be with you today. I'm pleased to be joined by Bob Kopp from Rutgers University. He was a member of the writing panel for our climate position statement. And joining us virtually is Don Boesch from the University of Maryland. Don chaired our climate position statement. We're here to answer any questions you may have about that statement. Today, we're also releasing a revised statement on data. Although, unfortunately, we don't have anybody from the panel here on that. If you have any questions about that, we will be more than happy to connect you to an appropriate person on that panel to answer the questions that you might have. Before we get into the details on the two position statements, I want to just quickly run through our process to develop position statements and how they're used. AGU's position statement committees are comprised of AGU member scientists, they're volunteers, and they are put together to recommend and create statements which are ultimately approved by the AGU's Board of Directors. Approximately every 4 years, the committees look to see if we need to revise any of our position statements based on progress and additional knowledge that's gained through the work of our member scientists. When these individuals, when it's made a decision to revise a panel, there are subsets of scientific experts in those particular topical domains who then are convened and they put together the draft that ultimately goes to our Board of Directors for approval. The individuals are diverse for their expertise and they're balanced by their career stage, geography, and gender. AGU uses position statements for 3 clear purposes. They are a clear formal view of the scientific consensus on important issues. We use them as guides in our own science policy work on what that particular topical area, but on other related policy issues. And we are also very pleased that policymakers, the media, and other organizations use them and reference them in their work. Our data position statement was drafted by a panel of 12 data scientists. Briefly, here is what is new. First, to champion open and transparent data. When data is available, we need to be equitable and ethical and make it accessible so that anyone and everyone can trust and value the information. Second, to enable a robust science ecosystem, data must be shared and available so that we learn from each other around the globe and build upon previous work. And third, to create an effective culture, we must recognize and reward those who support this kind of data community where data is shared so we create real, not superfluous changes. In our revised climate position statement that we are releasing today, AGU is declaring a climate crisis. It was developed by a panel of 15 scientists. The updated statement used the global commitment as a new foundation embodied in the Paris Climate Agreement to hold the increase in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius and strive to keep it below 1.5 degrees Celsius. This will require achieving net zero emissions between 2050 and 2070. We deliberately called it a crisis because we are at a stage at which the future of the biosphere and our species will be determined. It is a turning point. There is no question that humans are disrupting the world's ecosystems and we are undergoing major changes. I now want to turn it over to Don and Bob to give a bit of the details behind of the science that has informed this update to our climate position statement. Bob?
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to give you the bad news first and then turn it over to Don to give you the good news. So here's the bad news. Greenhouse gases have risen to levels unprecedented in at least the last 800,000 years, leading to a more rapid change in our climate than has been typical in Earth history. The current decade is now the hottest in the history of modern civilization. It is extremely likely that human activities, especially greenhouse gas emissions, are the dominant cause of the observed warming since the middle of the last century. There is no alternative explanation supported by convincing evidence. Climate change is exacerbating many existing challenges, stressing every region of the world and every sector of the economy, and is expected to worsen current inequalities. that changing climate will impact health, increasing heat-related deaths, various mental and physical illnesses, and some infectious diseases. It will accelerate hazards such as flooding, wildfire, and dryland water scarcity, and increase toxic algae and the intensities of droughts and hurricanes. It will disrupt the economy, shifting agriculture and fisheries productivities, diminishing worker productivity, and damaging critical infrastructure. Economic or social disruption is likely to drive migration and compound risks of conflict and global insecurity. Climate change will also continue to severely stress the world's ecosystems, including threatened coral reefs, permafrost landscapes in the Arctic, decrease biodiversity, and cause extraordinary numbers of extinctions on land and the ocean. And now I'm going to turn it over to Don to give you the good news.
Well, thanks, Bob. Well, the good news is it's not too late, but we do have don't have a lot of time. Society must address the growing climate crisis now. That's because the amount of warming in the coming decades will depend on the choices society makes and how they affect future emissions. Stabilizing warming requires bringing net global carbon dioxide emissions to zero and sharply reducing emissions of other greenhouse gases. This means that we need to use energy more efficiently, to transition to non-greenhouse gas emitting energy sources, products, and services, and take measures to remove and store CO2 from the atmosphere. Society must also prepare to cope with and adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change that cannot be avoided. Done smartly, climate change mitigation and adaptation can yield significant economic and social benefits, including better human health and well-being, employment opportunities, more sustainably used resources, and conserved biodiversity. Scientists and engineers, notably including members of the American Geophysical Union, must take up this challenge and continue to engage with policymakers, communities, businesses, and the public to undertake solution-oriented research and analysis. Scientific institutions, including academic institutions and government agencies, should expand and prioritize their support for research, application, and knowledge dissemination to address the climate crisis. So, Chris, that's the brief summary of the position statement. On behalf of all 15 members of the writing panel, I want to thank you and the AGU Council and Board for engaging us to take on this important task.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Don. So to sum up, we have a climate that's in crisis. It's not a red state, it's not a blue state, it's not a specific country issue, it's a global issue, and so we must all work together. In addition to needed actions by governments at all levels and corporations, all of us need to work together to collaborate and develop solutions that will enable smart choices for us to be able to meet this crisis and address it. As Don said, it's not too late. All of us, I know, share a goal to be better stewards of our world because we want to leave a better world for the generations to come. And we need to work with policymakers at the local, state, national, and global level, with companies across all industries, across all parts of society, and effectively and quickly come up with the solutions that will allow us to avert this crisis. We can't afford anything less. With that, Don, Bob, and I are happy to answer any questions. And the lights are really bright in here, so I'm not sure I can see if a hand goes up.
That's all right. Do we have any questions from reporters in the room? Do we have any questions on the chat? No? Okay. All right. Going once, going twice. Well, Chris, Don, and Bob will be available for questions afterwards. Thank you very much to our panelists. And we'll conclude right there.
Thank you.
Thank you.